This is 1 minute to 20 GMT in London on Sunday, the 2nd of August 2020. And this is continuing the test editions of the KhoodeelaarTV channel, but the contents are not tests, they are real, and they will be regularized in our permanent schedule that we are working on. And this feature is reiterating the emphasis on the corruption of the Fleet Street, the mainstream media in Britain, which contains no reference to a recognition of the Eid al-Adha. That is a contextual observation we're making about the bias and the prejudice and the hostility of the mainstream media, because the mainstream media expects in current contemporary scenes, expects the general Muslim population to show as the racist, anti-Muslim, criminal, propagandist, and Thatcher ally Norman Tebbit asserted in his interview in April 1990 given to the Los Angeles Times, their allegiance to the cricket. Norman Tebbit had said in April 1990 in his interview, published first by the Los Angeles Times, that Pakistanis and Bangladeshis and others of similar backgrounds have to show their allegiance by showing which cricket club they supported. So it became later notorious as the Tebbit cricket test. That's the racist test which was being revived by Tebbit from previous similar pronunciations made by the likes of Enoch Powell. Enoch Powell was the hero of the Dockers, who in Tower Hamlets in the 1960s marched in support of Enoch Powell's racist hate speeches. So Norman Tebbit was continuing what Powell had actually said in the 1960s. Now, Powell was expelled from the Conservative Party at that time, being led by Edward Heath. And Heath was ousted and replaced by Margaret Thatcher, whose one of the main supporters and allies was, of course, Norman Tebbit. And Tebbit has been succeeded as MP for the same area in Chingford in London E4 by the Dracula Ian Duncan Smith, who is responsible for the forced massacre by suicide of thousands of vulnerable people who were denied their lawful, legal, and physically needed, materially needed support from the Department for Want and Poverty, DWP. So we are updating on the current poverty of ethics and morality in the current government, which is all over the place, but the disarray, moral disarray and dysfunction and unfitness is obviously evident in the current headlines. The headline in each of the two papers, Sun and the Express, focuses on the conviction on Thursday of sexual assault, conviction of Charlie Elphick. Charlie Elphick is a miniature Tebbit, has been a miniature Enoch Powell, has been a miniature Nigel Farage. With Farage, Charlie Elphick paraded himself against the sea near Dover as the champion of Little England against the marauding shiploads or boatloads of migrant refugees trying to escape poverty, hunger, and wars created by Britain, France, and America in their own countries. So that is the actual disarray, but that is not the whole. On the Times front page on Tuesday, the 26th of May, the Times paraded the defiance of Dominic Cummings, who is the real driver in the regime now cited at number 10 Downing Street. And he said that he did nothing wrong and he did not break the rules of the lockdown that others were being penalized for allegedly breaking. But the jeopardized moral fragility of the Johnson fronted but Dominic Cummings controlled regime is all over the place, right from the beginning of the defiant stance by Cummings through to this week, through to this day, because Johnson has been making contradictory statements and pronouncements about the advisability of the lockdown and the suitability of the lockdown and the relevance of it in the context of the economy. And what we have found in the published items published by conservative controlled editors and agenda setters is that Rishi Sunak has had a long history and a career as a hedge fund manager. And the point of that is that although he is being touted by certain quarters in the conservative circles in the media as a possible leader of the conservatives, meaning the possible prime minister, in the event that Johnson cannot be sustained at all, despite the fact that he is being touted as an alternative and a better option than Boris Johnson. The fact is that he is a more committed pursuer of the hedge fund agenda and the narrative and the economy. So therefore, he cannot be expected to help, let alone solidarize with the people who were betrayed by the failed Labour leadership, and the people have been victimized by poverty and low pay and all the other implications and repercussions of the pandemonium regime that has come into frontline focus of attention after the pandemic hit the UK. And the number of people that are being killed by this avoidable spread is one of the highest in the world and the highest in Europe per capita. And the details of the corrupt diversion technique being resorted to by Robert Jendrick, a friend of Boris Johnson's, divert attention from his exposed corrupt dealings with the porn billionaire Richard Desmond over the West Ferry Road Printworks, quote, luxury, unquote, degenerate developments of housing fit for billionaire recluses and billionaire oligarchs and other assorted carriers of illicit money from all over the world. After that disclosure became unable to be dislodged and got rid of, Jendrick has indulged in a series of denunciations of the current existing, although very limited, but existing regimes operated by local councils in controlling planning permissions and the main attack has been that it is a red tape. Red tape is a phrase that has been used before by reactionaries and right wingers and antisocial regimes and spokesperson and theoreticians to condemn any trace of accountability, any trace of audit, any trace of responsible safety obligations owed to the local communities affected by these degenerations. They call them developments, which is absolutely the opposite of the truth. And so, what we are looking at this weekend, the weekend of the Eid al Adha, still continuing, is that the regime in place, in power in the UK, is also being allowed to become even worse by the day due to the fact that the otherwise lauded forensic MP with the forensic skills, the former Director of Public Prosecutions, Keir Starmer, is being exposed every day as nothing but another conman. Conman spelled C-O-N with a small c and C-O-N with a capital C, meaning the conservatives. His ideology and his ideological bent, his orientation is bent. He has been bent towards the conservative ideology and the narrative, as he proved days before he left the Crown Prosecution Service, where he was installed as the DPP. And the directives that he announced from the Crown Prosecution Service as criteria for criminalizing people and punishing people for being poor included harsher, much harsher reprimands and retributions and penalties for being poor and for being vulnerable. And he disguised that as people being fraudulent. Poverty is, of course, fraudulence to the big looters and big criminals because poverty is the removal of basic means from people for human lives and decent human lives. So poverty has to be addressed first, and how poverty is created socially, how poverty is imposed locally and nationally and internationally. And we have discussed before that the majority of the people who are seeking refuge in the West and come from Africa and Asia are escaping situations that have been created and encouraged and operated and imposed by the influences of the military industrial complex that is the owner of war business. And so, therefore, all the pretentious claims about Jeremy Corbyn, about him being a radical, have been exposed every day because Corbyn is not a radical. Because if he were a radical, he would be addressing this military industrial complex every single day. He would be hitting the headlines as a campaigner against the created, deliberately, intentionally created refugee crisis and the migrant crisis created by the right, by the war creators. But he hasn't done that, nor have his so called ultra left allies and colluders like the Socialist Workers' Party and others. They have not done that. In fact, the ultra left in this country are fronts for the secret agenda operated in this country, as has been confirmed beyond any doubt by Boris Johnson this week by giving peerages, that is, membership of the British so called upper house in Parliament, to one of the most notorious racist, anti Muslim, genocide deniers, and supporters of the bombing in Warrington that killed innocent children and other people. Claire Fox. She has been also a supporter of the deniers who came on the media, which has given her prominent platform over the last 10 years to condemn the people who were condemning the massacres in the two mosques in New Zealand, massacres of the Muslims. She was denying the massacres of the Muslims took place by and was done by carried out by the anti-Muslim racist. She and others of her ilk were given the platform, and it was obviously a matter of time before she got even more bigger and higher platforms in this country. And Boris Johnson has confirmed that he supports a terrorist supporter, openly terrorist supporter. And that contrast that with the news that Shamima Begum, her ruling in her favor in that she was allowed by the Court of Appeal to come to the UK to put her case against the withdrawal of her citizenship. Her ruling has been now challenged by the government, Boris Johnson's government, and they are appealing against that ruling by the Court of Appeal to the Supreme Court. So Shamima Begum is still being derided as the jihadi bride. Now, when she went to Syria and when she went to whatever parts of Syria she went to with two of our fellow school friends, she did that despite the fact that Tower Hamlets Council, the local council where she lived and where she went to school, and our two school friends who went to school, the Daneford School, which has been named about 10 times since I campaigned to keep it a single-sex school in the mid-1980s. Daneford School was the responsibility of the local Tower Hamlets Council to make sure that its pupils were covered by the obligations the Tower Hamlets Council was under and is under to deliver safeguarding of children. Safeguards included, according to the reports, latest one covered in the last issue of Private Eye, the prevent agenda of the UK government allegedly funding through the Home Office various local councils and other groups to prevent alleged Muslim radicalization of Muslim children or Muslim people in the Muslim community. Now, while Shamima Begum remains the hate figure of those who attack her as jihadi bride, and we do not hold any brief for her, nor for anyone else who has been involved with her. We hold the brief for her as a child when she was betrayed, who was deprived by the depraved Tower Hamlets Council, failing to safeguard her and to protect her from any derailment of her life and the fellow school children that were in Syria, photographed after they were apparently pictured at the airport in Turkey through which they passed. So the Travelers Council is to be blamed for the jihadi bride tag and for all the other negative attributes that have been attached to her and by extension to the general Muslim community. And contrast with that, while Boris Johnson, who condemned Muslim women's headgear as representative or reminiscent of bank robbers, despite the fact that he knew that they were wearing their dress according to their faith, according to their choice and interpretation of their faith, and they were not criminals, let alone bank robbers. He has actually been promoting real terrorists and terrorist sympathizers and mass murder sympathizers and genocide deniers to the higher house of the current British Parliament. And this Claire Fox, who styles herself as the creator of the Institute of Ideas, is full of the worst possible ideas that any society needs. She is full of poison, denial, terrorist sympathy, mass murder sympathy, and racism and hostility and denial of Muslims' human rights. She has been associated with the people that style themselves as living Marxism, which in the 1990s accused the then ITN news organization of falsifying the photographs and evidence of the massacre by the Serbians of Muslims in a place called Srebrenica. Now, this is the one that the ITN authorities took to court for defaming its two reporters. Its reporter, Claire Marshall, Penny Marshall, and the Guardian's reporter. And this case ended with the living Marxists being found to have lied and defamed, and the ITN reports being vindicated by evidence that what they reported was true. After that, living Marxism changed to LM, and it has been trading since then as spiked. Now they are spiking the truth as well. So, and they're not living Marxists. They never have been. They're lying at the expense of Marxism. So the lying Marxists. And Boris Johnson is rewarding the lying Marxists in the very fortnight when the Russia report found that the government fronted by himself and the government fronted by Theresa May and the Home Office fronted by Theresa May had all interfered with the UK's security services, or at least the known ones, and stopped them from investigating alleged Russian, that is, foreign interference in British politics or British society. So this man is rewarding terrorists and racists. How dare the mainstream media call Shamima Begum jihadi bride? They have to say that she is nothing. She is just a poodle, just a stooge, just an excuse, as Frederick Forsyth said in the Express piece, which was rare in the last week about her, that she didn't kill anyone, she didn't murder anyone, she didn't do any of the terrorist things. And that is the reality. So we are now faced with a country in a pandemonium of a government which is not sitting idle and not showing any lack of enthusiasm when it comes to rewarding the true masters of its agenda, which is the foreign interferers and foreign powers and the terrorists that it needs and it uses and it allies with, and the terrorists that have actually praised them. And the American and the Russians maybe in terms of general kind of dealings, maybe at odds with one another. But the reality is that both of them occupy the same position of being owners of the British state as we now know it, as we now see it. And China is too. But the Chinese irritation is slightly a diversion. It will come back to what it was when it got the HS2 contract and the other big contracts. And the essential lesson is for the Muslims that we have nothing to fear as Muslims from the truth. If Muslims look for the truth and seek the truth, then the message of liberation and freedom for humanity and the world is in the truth. And as I said, the wars that are created by and fostered by and encouraged by the military industrial complex, which has extensions and parts in Britain, in America, and in other warfare backing, war weapons trading states and nations, these people are causing the migration, the hunger, the starvation, the wars, and the animosities and the hostilities on the planet. So the Muslims do not observe the Eid by shaking hands or embracing and causing the likes of the racist Andy Barnum to use that as a pretext to say that Muslims are causing too many risks for the spread of the virus. Andy Barnum is an ignorant racist, and he was exposed when he was in the government during the last years of the last government, of the Labour government, when he accused David Davis, who was then an opposition MP, and Shami Chakrabarti, who was at the Liberty Organization, and before she officially, in the context, I'm saying, officially met or knew Jeremy Corbyn, Andy Barnum had accused them of having an inappropriate relationship. And then he was threatened with legal action and he withdrew and apologized. But the essential fact is that Andy Barnum was caught lying, and he lied knowingly, invented a story in order to gain politically. Now, Barnum is doing the same thing now. He knows that Johnson fronts a very anti Muslim regime and is aided and abetted by the entire Fleet Street of anti Muslims. So Andy Barnum is capitalizing, exploiting that atmosphere. And we are saying that he is wrong and he must apologize to the whole community and withdraw his remark and never, ever again indulge in this kind of racist hate, incitement, and lies. And we are saying this to the Muslims in Manchester, in Greater Manchester area, that they have every right to demand that Andy Barnum withdraws his remark and apologizes and says that he is not like the Tory Craig Whitaker, who has said the same thing or similar things about the Muslims. And Barnum must make it clear that he is not a racist in the form of, in the shape of, in the guise of the Craig Whitakers in the world. And we are going to continue this narrative in the next hours. But for the time being now, it's 28 hours GMT and 28 hours UK time on Sunday, the 2nd of August 2020. Still the week of Eid al-Adha. We are saying goodbye, Khuda Hafiz, and we shall be doing the test edition of the real broadcast in the next hours.